And we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to G2I's event with Codux by Wix. I'm Thea, your community manager here at G2I. And today we have the Wix team with us. And together with me on stage is Omer, who's the head of product, and Omri, who's the CTO at Wix. We also have Jonathan, who's going to join us later in the question and answer portion. He is the VP of R&D at Wix. So we're so lucky because today these guys are here with us to finally share something that they've been working so hard on for more than 3 years. And it's a product called Codux. So Codux is the new IDE for React. It's a full front-end solution and an all-in-one visual development environment. We're also super excited to announce that everyone who's here with us today will get exclusive alpha access to the tool. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping. There may be some times that you won't see me in the camera, but I'm going to be around in the chat. You can leave your questions for us either in the chat or in the question mark on the right side. So that's the question and answer portion. We will address some questions throughout the chat, but some major ones, Omar and Omri and Jonathan will actually answer in the last 10 minutes of the session. So we will have around 10 minutes for the official demo. And while we're looking at it, feel free to send your reactions, send him some fire emojis if you like what you're seeing, share some comments, questions, impressions. We want this demo to be an engaging and interactive one. So that's it for me. I'm now ready to share the stage with Omri, who's going to start with this demo.
Thanks, Thea. All right, great to be here. Good evening or morning, depending on where you are, I guess. Yeah, we're super excited to show you our visual IDE for React. And before I go any further, allow me to introduce my co-presenters and colleagues. So I'm Omri. I'm the CTO of the Wix Innovation Group. With me is Omer Kenneth, who is going to demo the product. And on the driver's seat, we have Jonathan Martin, who will do the hard labor of the demo. So just another word about our group. We are an innovation group within Wix, and we are focusing on developer tools and experience. We all come from development background. We all write code, and we all love TypeScript and front-end in general. So with that in mind, we are very excited today because this is actually our pre-launch party. We're going to go open beta in the upcoming weeks. We're just gearing towards that. We call the product Codux, but previously known as Wix Component Studio. So if you see some leftovers, we're cleaning those. So pre-launch party, you're amongst the first people to have access to this product without signing an NDA. And that means we would love to get your feedback. We would love to hear from you, answer your questions. And of course, if you need assistance installing, using, and enjoying Codux, contact us either through the app or our Discord channel. And of course, if you need our assistance or support getting the product into your organization, we'll be more than happy to help. So I have like a few more minutes of intro, and then we'll get to the main event, which is Omer and Jonathan's demo, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, as he had mentioned. So let's talk about components. Great way to architect your software, right? Like what would we do without it? That's why we all use them, and that's why every modern web app is built with them. And if you ever get to the misfortune of being in an environment that isn't component-oriented, you know what a nightmare it is, how much copy and pasting is done, how fast you're spaghettifying the code. And I guess that's why we all kind of choose to use this paradigm. But there are a few limitations. We are using text or code to describe something that is fundamentally visual. And that's not always the most efficient way of working. Of course, it is visual, so we need to collaborate with designers, product people. Sometimes we have visual QA. Each one of these personas have a different mental model and using different tools to do their job, to do their part in this collaboration, and every one of them thinks that they have the latest version in their own tool, creates a lot of confusions. These sources instantly get out of sync. And on a technical level, when we are thinking about components, usually we don't really care about buttons. We're thinking web apps, pages, forms, interactive elements. So complex components require a complex environment setup that could be confusing, time-consuming, and we aim to help with that too. We are imagining a world in which it's easier and more enjoyable to edit visual code, and a place where you can collaborate with your colleagues over deployable code. So designers, product people, they can play with the product and actually have PR ready for you to decide if you want to go live with. So quicker turnover, less meetings, less documents, more time for coding. That's why we are introducing Codux, and it's a visual IDE for React component, and it is literally an IDE first. So you install it locally, you work on your local file system, you deploy however you choose to deploy. And we are using the code, your code, as the only source of truth. We're not going to pollute it with junk. It's going to remain with your preferences of styling, and we're not going to make it dirty. And we allow to, via code, to set up an environment where you can play with your component or test them. And it can be as simple or as complex as you need it to be. So it can be as simple as just dragging a component, setting some properties, or fetching real data from a live server, a local server, mocking it, whatever you choose. Our supported stack at this point is React component written in TypeScript. As I said, we love TypeScript and use the types to give you a very rich contextual editing experience. And you'll see in a second what I mean by that. Of course, it's your code, bring your own libraries, write in your own style. As far as styling solutions, we're fully supporting CSS and CSS models, SAS and SAS models, and Stylable, which, if you're not familiar with, it's an amazing component-first styling solution that is also happening to be developed in our group. And with that, Omer, Martin, take it away.
Thank you very much, Omri. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining. It's one of the first time we're doing this session, so we're super excited. So try to be easy on us, I guess. So we're gonna start. I'm gonna try and do as much demo as I can and talk as much as I don't like, less than needed, I guess. We would really want to show you the product. So the project that we're gonna work on is a project we have created for the sake of this demo. It's called Codux. That's the name of the company. And as you can see, it's a new startup in the Git kind of interface, right? They're doing source control hosting solution that they've created with a new impact of social connection between their users. I've obviously just invented all of that. It's important to mention that it's a standard React application, okay? So it works just like you know it. The change that we're going to do today, what we've received from the design team, is that we have the application working, right? It's maintained by developers using the product, but we just got this new request. We want to make the social connections a bit stronger in the application. Product people have planned, design team have designed, and we now have this redesign of this structure. We want to make the button more prominent. We want to put it in a more prominent place. And that's our redesign to kind of improve the social impact in this made-up application. So let's take a look at what Codux is. So what we see here is our project picker. These are all of the recent projects that I've worked on. I'm going to select Codux because this is the application and I'm actually changing now. Application is a standard React application. So you can see that it has all of the different things that you may know from React applications like package.json, node modules. It has component files and style sheets, has setups for different technologies that are used, third-party libraries that we're using here. So everything that you know as a React application, you can see it running on my IDE. So it's all accessible from my IDE. And this is what we're creating. So what you just saw, you're seeing the same thing right now, just in a bit more visual display. What we're seeing here is Codux application, but in a bit of a new view. So on the left, these are the components from the project, the components that I've recently worked on. These are automatically detected from the code of the application. So we automatically display them on the left, and they're easy to kind of access and edit. In the center, these are all of the boards that were created. Boards are a way to render components, okay? A way to render components in different states, different permutations of these boards. Obviously, React components can have different permutations based on different data that they receive. So the board is a way that we have created to kind of mock these states and definitely edit those states. These are boards that I have created. It's not automatically created. I've created them for the sake of my work. So let's take a look at the project just for a second. What we can see here is the editor environment, our studio. In the center, the visual stage, this is the application that we're editing. But if we'll switch to preview mode, we can see that everything is live. Everything is connected to a state. If there are stylings, things that are triggered based on interaction, they will be triggered. Things that should open pop-ups, alerts, trigger any behavior, it's all real, it's all live, it's all React. But once I switch to editor mode, I can see that I can actually access the inner parts of this app component. I can see that I can select elements both from the visual stage that we're showing right now, or from the panel on the left, the elements panel, which is kind of a representation of what we're seeing here. So it's a combination of your JSX, what the component is built out of, right? We can see different HTML elements like divs or spans. We can see different components from my project, and we can see components from third-party libraries that I'm using. And we can see things like expressions, repeating items, things that are bound to data, things that make the component behave in a certain way, show or hide elements based on the different data that we receive. So the elements panel is a reflection of the code that you have created, right? So you can always change the code. The elements panel always updates according to code changes, and vice versa. Every change that we're doing here will be reflected in code. We're going to see it in a second. So going back to the task that we've received, right? So we got this redesign of this whole new layout. What we want to do is fix it. So we're going to go back to the home page, because the change that we want to do is happening in the top bar component. When I select it, I can already see that there are 3 boards that were already created for these components. These represents different states, different permutations that this component can show. Things that we want to check, things that we want to edit, and things that we want to make sure that are not happening. Let's select one of them, because what we want to do is edit the component. Once I'm selecting the component, I can see that on the right side, on the properties panel, I can already see the properties of this component. This, just like the elements panel, is a reflection of the code. Every property that I have for this component will be reflected here in the panel with a visual controller that helps me pass data to this property. I can do it from the panel right here, but every change that I'm doing is immediately written to my file. So I can manage my changes, and I can manage the board changes from both the visual panel or from my IDE. This can be done from the IDE that we have here built in within Codux, or from the IDE that I'm using on my machine. In this case, we're using VS Code, but it doesn't really matter. And every change that I will do from this IDE will be reflected back to Codux, both on the visual rendering stage and in the panels that you'll see on the right. Okay, very cool. This is a way to mock the behavior, but we're not here to mock behaviors of components, right? We want to actually edit the component itself. So what we'll do is we'll drill into the scope of the top bar component. This is where the change is happening. So we know that we have 2 things that we need to do, right? We need to change the connect button, right? This is where we want to actually make the changes. And we want to put it in a new location to make it more prominent. Let's start with the first fix. So in order to do that, we're going to drill in another scope to the connect button component, because this is the one that we actually want to edit right now. Selecting the button element from the elements panel. Now I can see the element that I'm selected on. Going back to the panels on the right, we have two new panels that we haven't seen yet. So the first one is the computed styles, a representation of the styles that are applied on the element that I'm currently selected on. So in this case, I'm actually seeing the styles that are applied on this button element, kind of similar to what you know from Inspect and kind of DevTools. It's a very similar solution, shows me what is currently applied on this element. It's not good just for the sake of kind of reflection. It's also a very powerful navigation tool. A click here on this button will take me to the last panel that we didn't talk about, the style editing panel, our CSS editor. Now, as you can see, I'm selected on the selector where this CSS property was written in. So what I wanted to change was the background color. And when I clicked it on the computed style, I was redirected here, selected on the selector, and already in the scope of the background. Let's take a look at the code. And we can see here that I'm using this value. Obviously, I don't want to use an RGB value. I want to use a variable, and I want to use the new color that I've received from the design team. So we already have that variable in our system. We've used it in different places. So I'm just going to select it. And you can see that once I'm selecting it, it's immediately written to the CSS, okay, to the selector that I was selected on. And I can see it obviously rendered on stage. Another change that I want to do is the text color. So I'm going to scroll a bit up, and I'm just going to do that. I'm going to change the color just like we did before. Again, I don't want the RGB value. I want the variable. So I'm going to change it to this one. And now it looks according to the design that I've received. If I'll move back to preview mode, I can test the behavior of this one. And I can see that I almost completed, but not completely. I didn't finish with the hover interaction. So let's move back to editor mode and lock the element on the hover state. This is our way to mock the behavior, the CSS behavior of this element. But once we lock it, we don't just see it on stage, but we also get this new selector button in hover state. This is what we want to edit, right? So we're going to scroll back down and we're going to choose the color that we want for the background. Again, something that we've received from the design team. And once I'm selecting it, you can see that it's written again to the file, and I can see the behavior. So now I'm locked on this state. Unlocking the state will help me see the triggered behavior. Cool. So that was the first thing that I wanted to fix. Now, going back one step backwards to the top bar, I want to put the connect button a bit higher up, right? This was the place that it was now designed to. So I'm just going to drag it here in the elements panel and place it where I want it to be placed. If you'll take a look at the code, you can see that basically we pushed it up in the J6 order. And this is now where it should be placed to fit my new design. So let's just take a look at different states of this component to make sure that we didn't break anything, something that we didn't see before. But we can see that in the three different permutations of this component, we're fine. It looks as it should. Let's take a look at the app component because it's also contained over there. But we see that it's perfect. This is exactly like how it was designed in the design tool by our design team. Okay, so that was task number one. I've got a new design. I've opened the project, entered the component, fixed the design. The only thing left to do is to push it to my coworkers to make sure that it all looks good, to review my code. We'll show a bit later about how it's done. But let's move on to the second thing. So obviously we did the new design, but that's not enough. Now we got a new request. We want to show our users how many connections each one of them has. So we made the connect button a bit more prominent, but now we want to make it clear for them. So now we need to create a new component from scratch. We don't have this one at all. So we'll just go and create one. So going back to our homepage, clicking a new component button will open this dialog. In this scope, I'm now requested to give a name for this component, but all of that can be configured in many ways. So you can control and how the component looks, what are the files that a new component will create, what imports do you want, if you want a folder that contains style sheets, variables that you need, any setup context, whatever you need from your component. Any component can be configured to have more of those templates tailored to the way you want the code to look like. When I'm creating the new component, 3 files are created in this case. First one, obviously, is the TypeScript file of that component. The second one is the style sheet for that component. The style sheet is based on the styling solution that I've selected in the configuration of this component. And the third one is the board that will help us later on to pass data to this component and mock it. Okay, so this is the very basic structure that we create. Again, let's take a look at the code to see it, but we can see that it's a standard React component with a very basic JSX structure. Let's expand it. So clicking this add button right here will show us the add panel. The add panel, kind of similar to the elements panel, contains a JSX element that can be seen. We have different HTML elements. We have components from my project or components from third-party libraries. In this case, we're using Bootstrap for the sake of this project. It can be any library that you're using, okay? And we want to start adding elements that we need. So the first one would be the icon. We're going to just drag the icon into the structure of the component, and we can see that it will import the button from where we wanted it, the icon from where we want it, and add it to the structure. But from a first look, I can see that we have a problem. It's not rendered, and I can see this red dot. This is a required property for this component. Again, this is a component that I'm using, and it has a required property because it was defined that way. This is the code of that component. We're just reflecting that in the panel. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give it a value. And in this case, I'm actually writing to the JSX. As you can see, once I've given it the value that it was needed, it's rendered as I expect it to look, and I don't see any errors anymore. Cool. Second thing that we need to add is another span, another text field that will later on be connected to data and will represent the number of connections that this account has. So in this case, what we want to do is actually hook it up as a property, expose it to the interface of this connection props. So we're going to call it count because this is the property that we want. We want it to show us the count of followers that each person has. And once we expose it, we can see that we basically don't see anything right now. And why is that? Because we didn't provide any data to it. Let's go back to the scope of the board. Now I can see this new property that I've created. Again, wrote it in code, but I see it in the panel. We currently don't expose props yet from the panel. We will add this capability, but it's a reflection of the code, so every code change is reflected. Once I give it some kind of a value, I can see it written to the board file, and I can see the rendered on stage. So that looks cool, right? I've created the component, I've exposed it, but I can see that the layout is not designed as I want it to look. I'm going to select the top level element, right? This div, this is where we change the layout. And going back to the style editing panel, I'm going to choose this root selector. This was automatically created because of the setup that I have for this component. So what we want to do is to use a basic flex layout. We don't need more than that in this case, which is demoing. So we're going to use flex, and we want to make it centered. So we're going to use align items center. And perfect. This is what we wanted to have. The only thing left for us to do is to import it into the top bar component. So let's go back to the top bar component, open the add panel once again. But now when we will search for it, we can see that we have a new component, connections component. So the add panel kind of shows the content of my project, of your project. It's not sticky content. It's always changed according to your project. So once I'm adding this component into the structure of the top bar, I can see that it's not connected to the data, right? It has property, but it's not exposed, not connected to the top bar props. So let's do that as well. Let's hook it up. I can always jump from the props panel to the place in code that I want to change. So in this case, we don't have the option to expose it yet through the visual panel, but I can go to the place in the visual panel that shows me this property and just jump to the place in code. And this can be done to this IDE, or you can take it with you to your IDE. And we basically want to make it easier for you to go from the rendering of things and from the visual panels that we've created to quickly go to the placing code that you will need to do in order to fix things if you cannot do them from the panel. This is really efficient way to navigate through your code. So one last thing that I can see here is now that it's contained within the scope of the top bar component, the bigger one, it's not laid out as I wanted. I need to add a gap. So I'm going to open the style editing panel once again, and I'm going to choose the root selector once again. I'm just going to give it gap so we can see that it's as I've designed it. I want to give it 3 pixel gap. This is what the design team have given us. Once I use it, I can see that it's actually laid out as I wanted it to look. Okay, so that was mainly my last task. I'm just going to make sure that it looks fine in all of the different permutations, right? So I have this app component and I have this top bar view. Let's take a look at all of the top bar boards. See that I didn't break anything. It's all aligned to the new design that I've received. The only thing that is left for me to do is push my changes to my team members. So obviously, it's all connected to Git flows, right? Because we're just editing files from project. We're editing React files, we're editing CSS file or Sass file in this case, TypeScript files. So it's all connected to Git flow, just how you know it. You can do it from Codux. You can do it from your IDE or from whatever way you manage your Git flows. We don't change that. We're just connected to the way you work. So once I've committed and pushed my changes, basically I'm done with the task and I'm kind of done with the demo. So just before we finish, let's recap on what we just saw. So Component Studio help you visualize your own code, your own components. You can see the actual props, the actual styles, structure, all of that generated from your code and alive next to your code, reflected from code changes and reflecting back to the code when doing edits, but while maintaining your conventions, the way that you write your code, the way you want to maintain it. You can edit the style and structure of your components just how you want them visually, from any context, any scope, right, in isolation, or from bigger context. And you can work alongside your own IDE and with your current development workflows and technology. We don't want to change that. Okay, so I guess that now that we're done, we're really interested to hear your thoughts. So thank you very much for listening. We're now going to do a Q&A session and kind of hear what you have to say and ask.
Awesome. Thank you so much for showing us, Omer and Omri. That was really cool. We do have a lot of questions that popped up during the session. A couple have already been answered by your teammates, but we've handpicked a few that we're going to highlight in the stage. And the first one I have here is from Richard. I noticed you were running VS Code alongside Codux. Is Codux a companion to a user's existing IDE, or is it used as a standalone?
To take this one?
Please do.
So it really depends on your role and what you're expecting to get out of Codux. I think most of our developers are using both VS Code or their favorite IDE in parallel with Codux, and that allows us to use the best of breed for whatever task you're on. So stuff that needs rendering, pixel perfect, Codux is really a time saver. And when it's heavy logics and coding, then switch to the IDE, and the experience is seamless. It's much less of the moving around that you usually do between the browser and the dev tools and the IDE and the terminal and back again. So it kind of simplifies the workflow. It can replace the IDE, but I find that for heavy coding, I like to use them both.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I hope that answers the question. We have another one here, and it goes as, is one goal of Codux to drop the need for traditional design software, such as Figma, InVision, and Zeppelin, in order to reduce the iteration cycle time between design and engineering?
It's a very good question, and it's not the first time we were asked that, obviously. So not necessarily, and that would be like the simplified answer. We're not trying to change completely the way you work, right? We're trying to just give you better ways to work as you want to work. So we're not necessarily changing your design tool right now. You can still use whatever design tool that you're using, let's say Figma, to create the basic design. But these design tools, as much as they've improved along the years, they're still static design tools. What we're doing is we're editing React code, real production code and production environments, but in a way that is visual and in a way that is similar to those flows that you'll need to do in design tools. But at the end, they edit code and they help you collaborate with other team members on top of the code base. So not necessarily looking way further, maybe, but currently not necessarily. This is really depends on how comfortable you feel with Codux. The more you feel comfortable, the less you need other tools kind of to help you around.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for that, Omar. And then my last one for now is, how about accessibility features, ARIA attributes, semantics, WCAG guidelines, and contrast checks?
I'm gonna
Okay, maybe I'll take this one.
Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me well. So up till now, as we said, Codux is a very early stage product. We up till now, we developed the capabilities of rendering your components and the editing panels. And we came over to you guys to hear your thoughts and get exactly that kind of feedback, hearing what you guys feel you need the most. And that's what we'll work on next. So if better accessibility to ARIA attributes, of course, we expose them through our properties panel. That has to be said. But any additional ease of use features, stuff that you need, that's what we want to hear, so we can expose them better and help you guys out with getting your work done as fast and fluidly as possible using Codux.
Amazing. That makes a lot of sense. And hopefully we can also provide you that feedback as a community who's been, graced with this opportunity to get alpha access. I have one here, and it's asking, how does Codux deal with global state managers like Redux, for instance, like adding selectors or adding lifecycle and hooks to trigger actions?
Omri, you want to take this?
Sure.
Sorry, I can't hear any audio. Are you answering?
Right, switching to my mic. Can you hear me?
Yes, we lost you for a bit, but
Or we switched.
get the answer.
Right. So regarding global state management, we don't have out of the box support for it. However, because you wrap your component in a board, you can have whatever setup you require. So you can bridge the gap and use whatever global or remote state management. You just need to put in the wiring yourself because it's very much stitched into your application.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Omri. We got it this time around. I have another one question from Leonardo, which is, do you have any plans to extend support for other styling libraries? In my case, styled components.
Yes, we definitely do, and we're looking for you to help us make the decision on what to focus first. We just had a meeting about style components specifically a week ago, and we are going there, but we have a ton of features that we want to implement, and requests like that help us make, focus on the right things first. So it's coming soon, I hope.
Amazing. Let me just quickly scroll into the questions and see if there's new ones coming up.
So just while you're scrolling, I'll just remind everyone that it's accessible for you to download right from the website. You have the early access. You can see it here. It's circled in the red circle. So wixcomponentstudio.com. This is still our website. Sorry for that. It's changed very soon. But you can all download it. And we've created a Slack channel to support you all for anything that you may need, and just to give you quick support so you won't have to kind of look into documentation and stuff. So feel free to use it and use us to get support and get started with the product. Sorry.
Cool, thank you for that. So one of the popular themes that have come up in the chat and in the questions here is if you are planning to support React Native someday.
If there is a demand, we'll probably go there. At the moment, we're heavily relying on the browser or the Chromium rendering environment. So of course we will have limitations around that. But if there is a demand from the community, we'll go that way too. Just let us finish with style component first, maybe.
Cool, amazing. I think that's about it for the questions we got this time around. There are a couple more questions that your teammates have been so very good at answering while you were presenting. But I'm sure that if anything else comes up, people from our community can feel free to ask the team at Codux anytime, because Tal has shared a link to a Slack channel, which everyone is welcome to join. You can get support or a place to provide feedback as you're playing around Codux. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. That's about it for us. Super thankful for the team at Wix for gracing us with their presence and for this exclusive alpha access. This is actually our first community event at G2I, so it's pretty crazy that it's with folks like you. We're very honored and super happy. Thank you to everyone in the community that attended with us here today. If you like this sort of event and if you feel like your developer friends should also get access to them, just feel free to message me on Slack or email and give me a developer referral so we can invite them over to our community. Thank you so much. We're ending a little bit early. If you have more questions, the chat is going to be accessible. There will also be a replay that you can access on this link. We're going to send the link to download Codux and the link to the Slack channel in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for all the great questions.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.